You can see a hand in the air from the cocks of the Sydney crew in the red.
Away. Nice quick start from both crews.
A slight asymmetry in terms of their direction, aligning itself a little more now.
I think we'll see that there is a buoy in the middle that will go between both crews, if I'm not mistaken. Sydney University has to go around that buoy. They can't come across this first corner.
Sydney with maybe a very slight advantage out of that start, but really not a great deal in it. So the freeway in the background. 4.1 kilometres, this course for the men's Australian boat race. 11th modern day running of an event that dates back more than 150 years.
So as we can see from this aerial shot, there is not much in between these crews, especially as we start to come around the bend. And as I mentioned before, the river starts to narrow quite significantly. We should be able to see the foliage of the island on one side, on the left-hand side of picture. And you may also see a little bit on the right-hand side. So there we see the start of the island.
It's the freeway on the right. The cycle path, some interested cyclists moving along. Pretty much a line ball at the moment. .1 kilometres. How long are we expecting this from a time perspective?
So it does depend a little bit on which way the tide is going, but probably looking to be about 16 minutes or so.
Coming out past the island now, Sydney's found an advantage, about half a boat length. Sydney in the red, University of Melbourne in the blue. Sydney with the yellow blades, Melbourne the white. So we get a good shot of the two crews counterposed there.
So both crews looking to stay as relaxed as possible now. The start's over, the exhilaration's there, the adrenaline's there. You just got to settle into your work. It's very tough now. Melbourne University needs to work hard to not let Sydney University break away and get clear water. As soon as there's clear water, then they can take the pick of the lines on the river.
Get an idea of the speed the crews are travelling, looking at the cyclists there as they wind their way along. Are they coaches potentially in some of the on the bicycles there?
Yes, correct. So I believe Michael Poulter for the Melbourne University men's crew should be cycling along, watching very closely.
And allowed to give instruction or encouragement?
Look, it's when you're out there on the water, there's not much you can actually hear, especially with the other noise that's going on, the boats, etc.
As they move underneath the Church Street Bridge, which links Church Street in Richmond to the famous Chapel Street in South Yarra. Here in Melbourne, about 2 and a bit boat lengths, the margin at the moment to Sydney University.
So as you can see now, the boats have lined up. They're basically rowing along the same line. So Sydney University's capitalised on their front position to move over into the centre of the river, and they must have identified that as the fastest line to be. It also does mean that their wash is being rowed through by Melbourne University, and that does affect the boat run. It makes the water just a little bit more ruffled and harder to row cleanly.
Okay, concentrating on the Melbourne crew there, the yellow boat, blue uniforms, white blades. Across the Cremorne Railway Bridge, one of the many bridges crossing the Yarra as it winds its way through Melbourne. Sydney now charting a course slightly to the north as they look to cut the next corner.
So they'll come in nice and close to the cycleway. The cycleway comes down basically onto water level, so the cyclists will have a very close view of the race in about 30 seconds' time.
So 3 boat lengths now. What's going through them? What can Melbourne be thinking about now?
It's a very tough position for Melbourne University because you can't see your opponent. Sydney University can see where Melbourne University is, so any push that Melbourne University does make, Sydney University can have a very clear view of that and respond in kind. It becomes quite a job for the Melbourne University coxswain to keep your crew motivated, keep them in the hunt, keep them firing as much as possible.
Melbourne choosing a slightly different line there to avoid some of that wake you were talking about. But Sydney holding a commanding advantage. Flotilla of bicycles accompanying the crews as they make their way down parallel to the freeway. The Hoddle Street Bridge, the next landmark for them. Sydney really looking in great synchronicity.
So Sydney University coming slightly over into the centre of the river again. The next corner is around to the left, so onto the south side. So they're going to make the most of that corner. They have the free run of the river as they're so far in front.
Under the Hoddle Street Bridge. Really tall order now for the crew from Melbourne University. A fantastic spring afternoon. It almost brings into focus the really interesting nature of the head-to-head event, that once one boat steals an advantage, it's huge psychological and physical challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. We find in most laned or buoyed courses, most of the Olympic distance rowing that is done in the calendar year, there's very little or basically no interaction between boats. Whereas in this match racing, the head racing, that's not the case. So there is ability to influence the other crew, both psychologically by being directly in front of them, and they will be able to feel that boat wash coming off the back of your boat.
As Melbourne University still holding that margin at the moment, goes under the Morell Bridge, a fantastic pedestrian and cycle bridge that links either side of the Yarra. The Amy Park on the right, home of the Melbourne Victory and the Melbourne Storm. An amazing sporting precinct within their Collingwood Football Club, and having their National League Netball franchise housed there as well. Rod Laver Arena, the Melbourne Tennis Centre, Australian Open coming up, MCG in the background, all within walking distance of the city. Botanic Gardens on the left, you can see the lakes. It's just a fantastically compact city. Sydney University holding that margin at the moment. They'd be comfortable with that?
Absolutely. They have the ability now just to really calm down and focus on rowing nice and long, nice and smooth, whereas there might be just a little bit more panic in the minds of the Melbourne University crews. A rowing race is always much easier physically. It feels much easier when you're in front.
You can see some of the wake that you were talking about before, just ever so slightly, but it has to be a factor.
Yeah, as much psychologically as physically. The fact that you can sort of feel those blades, a couple lengths in front, gives you a measure of how far away they are. So, if you're right on their tail, those puddles when the blades come out of the water, you can feel them a little bit more sharply. Whereas if they're a little bit less prevalent, you know that the other boat's a fair way in front.
So it looks like the Sydney University men heading for potentially their 6th win in a row.
Yeah, that's correct.
Men's version of this famed Australian boat race. Melbourne perhaps trying to choose a slightly different line. There's only so many lines you can choose, but I guess in a relatively straight part of the river. It was that surge in the first The first kilometre really that established that break, which they've been able to build on all the way.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that often this race is run as a race to get a boat length in front or get clear water over the other crew, because then you can dictate, as I've mentioned previously.
As Sydney slips under the Swan Street Bridge, the last of the bridges they'll have to traverse, past Rod Laver Arena. I doubted the pedestrians and people in their cars there, wondering what it's all about. But a fantastic sight. And really a crew in rare form and in an event that Sydney's made their own in recent times.
So we're coming into about the last 600 metres or so. And this race looks like it's well and truly sewn up. There's not much that can happen from here, barring an unforeseen breakage or something along those lines. So this is Sydney University's race.
Yeah, really stellar performance, and they're to be congratulated. As they come down towards the last bend, they'll turn around to the left. We saw such a spectacular finish in the previous race, the college women's regatta. It's that great shot from overhead pans. You'll see the last turn into the finishing buoys down towards the iconic Flinders Street Station, Federation Square. You can see they're looking camouflaged in the background. The numerous boathouses that are the hub of all the rowing that goes on in the Yarra on the left-hand side. Melbourne University, the most prominent in the foreground. Skate park there on the left. Really everything in Melbourne here about people getting out and about within the city precinct. Sydney moves down towards the line. They've done a superb job today, right from the start. Slight advantage, able to extend that and gradually forge clear. A comprehensive result.
So coming in past the landing, you see a lot of the spectators watching the finish of this race. There are about 100 or 200 metres to go. No need to change the speed too much as they cross the finish line.
They cross the finish line. Marcus Britt, Jake Bicknell, Jackson Kench, Kieran Riak, Andrew Judge, Morgan Brooking, Jordan Duff, Will O'Shaughnessy the stroke, Andrew Lee the Cox, Don McLaughlin. Congratulations to him for having this cruise so well prepared.
You can see as they cross the finish line, a show of emotion from the Sydney University crew. It does go to show how much people cherish this event, and it means a lot to them.
And certainly a building year for Melbourne as we see them cross the line. 5 debutants in the crew, a relatively inexperienced crew. Lots of undergraduate students who are hoping will push on to bigger and better things in this event and in the national scene, and be able to try and redress the balance and recapture the Edmund Barton Cup.
Yes, next year we'll be back on Sydney Harbour. Another stunning situation, another stunning scenery environment for this rowing race.